What you're hearing is Pokemon's Lavender Town tune. Did it really drive kids mad?
Well, let's find out. Hello, Player One. Welcome to Gaming History Club. My name is Gabby.
Hello, and I am JP. This feels different. We are not doing the intro like we usually do.
I
But
know.
that's fine.
A little bit different, isn't it?
It's a Game Law episode. We're allowed to mix it up a little bit.
Also, it's our podcast.
Okay, calm down. Let's not get sassy.
Okay. So yeah, let's get right into it then. By the way, Player One, if you want to check out the full tune of the Lavender Town, we will leave a link in the description, but we won't play it here.
No, do so at your own risk, just in case you do turn into some sort of evil maniac halfway through this episode.
Yeah. If you want, leave it till the end of the episode if you want to listen to the whole thing, probably.
Yeah, right. But now, to the facts, Gabby.
To the facts, yes. So let's talk about the man behind the haunting masterpiece, which is Junichi Masuda. By the way, Junichi didn't just make this one track, the Lavender Town's tune, by the way. He actually composed all the music and sound effects for the first generation Pokemon games.
And not just that, though. So, our longtime listeners might recall that Junichi was actually the developer that almost deleted all of the game while it was still in development behind the scenes at Game Freak. Yeah, so if you want to hear more about this, you'll need to listen to one of our previous episodes, Games That Were Almost Never Made, our chit chat episode from a while back. But anyway, Junichi wrote the entire soundtrack for Pokemon, and he did this on his Commodore Amiga. And he was also experimenting with a concept in music which is called unresolved melodies.
Yeah, so that's why the tune feels unfinished, right? Like it wants to resolve, like it wants to finish, but it doesn't. It kept leaving you hanging, a bit uneasy.
Yeah, and this is supposedly exactly what gives Lavender Town this kind of off-kilter, ghostly energy as well.
Yeah, so later he rose through the ranks at Game Freak and eventually becoming one of the big creative leads, approving Pokemon designs and even joining the board of directors. So, yeah, certainly Junichi was a big deal.
He was a big deal and still is a big deal, but let's get back to Lavender Town now, or as our Japanese brethren would call it, Shion Town. So Shion actually means purple aster flower in Japanese, but depending on which kanji that you use, it can also mean the sound of poetry or remembrance, which totally fits the mood of Lavender Town, doesn't it? It's a place that's equally spooky, melancholic, and poetic in a way.
So let's talk about the town itself a little bit more then. Lavender Town was one of the towns in the first generation Pokemon games, which are Pokemon Red and Green in Japan and Pokemon Red and Blue elsewhere. Because I believe in the West, you don't really have Pokemon Green, don't you?
Yeah, that's correct. So I think what happened was that in Japan, when the games came out, they were Pokemon Red and Green. And then later on, they made Pokemon Blue, which is kind of like a updated version of the game. So some books were fixed, for example, and then Blue came out in Japan. But when the games came out for everywhere else in the world, we just received the updated version. So we got basically Pokemon Red and Blue instead, the updated games. It's like a 1.1 version that we all had. But in Japan, they had the 1.0 versions, which
Right.
were red and green. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so basically the Pokemon Red and Green, when it was released in Japan, it was back in February 1996.
Right. But Lavender Town wasn't just any other stop on your Pokemon journey. So in the first generation of games, Lavender Town definitely stood out as being different. So, whilst in most other towns in the game, you actually have a gym leader, and a badge to win, Lavender Town instead had a cemetery.
Yes, so the big landmark there was the Pokemon Tower, a 7th floor mausoleum for deceased Pokemon. So you actually had to climb it to progress in the story, and as a kid, that felt dark. Before this part in the game, we didn't even know that Pokemon could also die and didn't always just faint and crawl back into their Pokeballs after defeat, but they're actually alright. Um, but yeah, you didn't know that your Pokemon could die. That's crazy.
Up until we reached Lavender Town, most of the game was very about friendship and adventure. It was very innocent, but now when we get into this town, instead we are faced with this big haunting Pokemon tower and this story about restless spirits and a dead Kubone's mum. So the theme of this town hit very differently for us when we were playing as kids. All of a sudden we realized, yes, Pokemon can die. There is death. There is also ghosts, and we are confronted with having to let go of the past. It's almost like Pokemon decided to go a little bit Silent Hill on us.
And right at this moment in the game that gave rise to the famous urban legend or game lore that we want to talk about today, right? So, according to the story, when Japanese children between the ages of 7 and 12 reached Lavender Town and heard its eerie theme music, they started having certain symptoms.
Yeah, so some were quite mild. So they had experienced nausea, headaches, but some were a lot more serious. So some apparently had violent outbursts, some got brain hemorrhaging, and in the darkest versions of this tale, they were even driven to suicide.
Why only kids, you might ask? Well, the rumor had an explanation ready for this. Apparently, the music contained binaural beats and high pitched frequencies that only children could hear. So, while the adults are chilling, like not having any reactions at all, the kids were supposedly going cuckoo because of this.
Yeah, and this is the part that's actually half true, Gabby. So children really can hear higher frequencies. So they can actually hear up to 20,000 hertz, which is the maximum most adults will ever be able to hear in their lifetime. But when we reach adulthood, we tend to top out at around 15,000 hertz. And this is because naturally, as we age, our hearing just gets worse and worse. So what do you think, Abby? Should we actually test our listeners on this little bit of science?
Okay, so let's try out two tests, right? First, let's see if anyone can still hear 15,000 hertz. So I'm gonna play it for 2 seconds here. It won't be loud, but be ready to hear a high pitched noise. Here goes. Okay, and now for the brave 17,400 hertz. Here goes again.
So, listeners, congratulations. If you could hear the second one, especially, then you still have pretty good hearing. But in general, it's not an exact science, obviously. People's bodies, they differ from one person to another. But in general, if you can still hear 17,400 hertz, at least your ears are still, young in age. So, good job. The song allegedly contains these binaural beats and these higher frequencies that only children could hear. And this is apparently what turned them cuckoo, as you said, Gabby. Oh, and if you do have any pets, maybe give them a hug because dogs, for example, they can actually hear way more frequencies than we can. I think up to 50,000 hertz, even. So, yeah, maybe give them a little cuddle.
Yeah, might turn them a little bit uncomfortable after hearing that high pitched noise, right?
Yes. So, back to Lavender Town. As the rumor goes, it was those sharper and younger ears that doomed the children. They could supposedly hear the frequencies hidden inside of Lavender Town's music, and that's what sent them spiraling into madness.
Yeah, and of course, right? Once a good ghost story starts, the internet loves to make it even weirder. People started connecting the tale to something that did actually happen, which was Japan's rising suicide rates in the mid to late 90s, especially among teens.
Yeah, so the timing felt too good to be true. It was just enough to make it sound believable, and then people went, aha, it must have been the Lavender Town music that caused these rising suicide rates.
Yeah, and of course, right, completed with those so called evidence, if you want to call it that, like those newspaper clippings, medical reports and these spectrograms, basically visualizations of the music that allegedly showed hidden shapes and messages that buried inside the tune.
Yes, of course, because nothing says credible source like some guy on the internet saying, "Trust me, bro, I'm an audio engineer."
Sure, yes. But yeah, to be fair, it was hard to disprove back then as well, because most of the so called clippings were written in Japanese, and Western fans couldn't exactly jump on Google Translate easily back in 1997. So it's not that only Western fan could disprove it, but it's difficult to verify the source properly.
And so the legend spreads, and apparently 200 children were driven to suicide. And the developers, which are Game Freak, they were trying now to cover up what happened to avoid a scandal. And if that wasn't enough, you could actually apparently see this in the sequels. So in Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, Lavender Town is also in the game, but now when you enter Lavender Town, the music is noticeably happier. And even that old Pokemon Tower, which was the cemetery and the burial grounds, which had all the ghost Pokemon inside of them, that was gone and was completely replaced with a shiny new radio station.
Yeah, because nothing says we're hiding a mass tragedy with a conspiracy quite like switching from Ghost Tower to Smooth Jazz FM.
Yes, a classic distraction tactic, definitely. So, where did this urban myth even come from then? And did any of it actually happen?
The rumors didn't spread back in 1996 when Pokemon first released in Japan, but actually, it's much later, around 2010, in the usual places for internet creepypasta like Pastebin, 4chan, and of course the creepypasta wiki, which we will link in the episode description.
So, did Lavender Town's eerie, high pitched tones actually drive Japanese kids to suicide then? No, absolutely not. There's at least no real evidence that it ever did, and all of these so called proofs, of course, that were floating around online, well, the doctored newspaper clippings, it's all fake, fake screenshots, and bogus audio analysis. It was all just part of the hoax.
So, trust me, bro, basically.
Yeah, trust me, bro was wrong.
But yeah, what was true though, that Japan saw a rise in teen suicides in the late 1990s, like we mentioned before, but researchers linked that to much more grounded social factors, not a Game Boy game. There were no mass suicides linked to Pokemon release.
But, and this is a pretty big but here, this is where things do get real because Pokemon did trigger a genuine nationwide health incident in Japan. And this hospitalized not just children, but even many adults too.
So let's dig into this incident then. On Tuesday, December 16th, 1997, at 6:30 p.m., the 38th episode of Pokemon aired across Japan on 37 TV stations. Its title, Denno Senshi Porygon, or in English, Electric Soldier Porygon.
Around 4.6 million households were watching this episode live on TV, which just gives you an idea of how many more people must have actually been watching it at the same time as well. And at about 20 minutes in, Pikachu unleashes a thunderbolt attack on some incoming missiles.
So that blast triggered a rapid red and blue strobe effect, flashing 12 times per second for roughly 4 seconds long.
And what happened next was unlike anything television had ever seen before. Viewers, mostly children but also adults, began suffering from photosensitive epileptic seizures.
In total, 685 people were hospitalized, and Japan would later refer to the event simply as Pokémon Shock.
Yeah, so compared to the myth of Lavender Town, thankfully nobody died in this very real event that happened, but it did definitely send shockwaves, quite literal shockwaves, around Japan. While hundreds were admitted to hospital, thousands more experienced milder effects too. So this included headaches, dizziness, nausea, but also, quite much more frightening things that could happen to you. So like blurred vision, temporary blindness, or of course even complete loss of consciousness.
Yeah, two children even remained in hospital for over 2 weeks, which actually says how serious this must have been. And the Pokemon anime went on a 4 month hiatus, and Electric Soldier Porygon episode was never aired again anywhere in the world.
It is believed that this very real incident back from 1997, or as it's known in Japan now, the Pokémon Shock, gave the Lavender Town Syndrome legend just enough grounding to then feel much more plausible as well.
But while Lavender Town didn't actually drive anyone mad, it does raise the question, can music really cause that kind of reaction?
Right. So, according to the studies that I've looked into, music definitely has the power, at least a little bit, to do some stuff. So, it can definitely alter our moods and it can also influence our anxiety levels. But more physical responses, like affecting our heart rates and changing our cortisol levels, so the thing that makes us like more or less stressed, it can only do that mildly, basically. However, what does have a much bigger effect is not music, but noise. So, noise actually has a lot more power to make things go badly for us, especially very constant, very loud, and very harsh noises. They do have the ability to really make us unhealthy. And also higher frequency sounds. So, that's why we only made you listen to 2 seconds of those tests that we did before on our guinea pigs. Haha. But yeah, definitely noise can have much more health impacts. Music, a little bit less though, even if it is the unending melodies that Junichi was trying to pull on us with Lavender Town. It's not all that serious.
So yeah, that's basically the story behind Lavender Town Syndrome. A haunting mix of lore, mystery, and a dash of real world panic, I guess.
But what do you think, Player One? Is there any video game tunes that still haunt you to this day, year after year? And tell us why it is our very own Gaming History Club theme tune made by Tom. Please let us know your thoughts and send us a message from our website, gaminghistory.club.
And yeah, as usual, new episodes of Gaming History Club are released every other Wednesday, so make sure you subscribe and follow us on our social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook as Gaming History Club.
Come back in a couple of weeks. Player One will be back with a chit chat episode with our top picks of games that got banned due to political controversy. See ya.